Welcome to A Date with Darkness podcast, where I will be discussing the impact of hurtful and abusive relationships and how to overcome them so that you can move through your pain and get to the kind of healthy relationships you want, need, and deserve. I'm Dr. Natalie Jones. I'm a licensed psychotherapist based in California. While I hope that you find this podcast educational and informational, please note it should not be substituted for treatment with a licensed mental health professional. Also, due to the nature of the podcast, some of the information presented on the show can be sensitive to some of my listeners, so please note that listener discretion is advised. Hello and welcome back to another episode of A Date with Darkness podcast. I have a very special guest planned for today's show. Her name is Miss Deandra Kanu. She's going to be talking with us about confidence, and I found her on TikTok, and she has a Confident Woman series. And I thought that that was something a topic that's very needed. It really needs and warrants further discussion because, one of the things that people struggle with, especially if you're getting out of a toxic or abusive relationship or a relationship in where it was unhealthy, there were some unhealthy dynamics, you may struggle with trusting yourself. You may struggle with feeling good about yourself or feeling worthy. And so we really sort of get down and dirty into confidence. We break it down and tease it apart. And I really enjoyed this interview. And you know what? There's some surprises in store for this interview. And so it's a little untraditional from some of the ones that I've done before. So without further ado, here's the interview with Deandra. Hello and welcome to the show, Deandra. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm super excited to chat with you and to have this conversation. And I know it's going to be a good conversation. I know you got some nuggets to drop on us, so I'm excited to talk with you.
Absolutely.
So, Deandra, tell us a little bit about you, who you are, what you do, and the passion behind your work.
Hi guys, I'm Deandra. I'm 26 years old. I was a communication major in college. I always wanted to do public speaking and connect with people. That's my passion, and it still very much is. So for those who maybe don't know, I was on previous seasons of The Bachelor and Bachelor in Paradise, and I've grown my platform now to kind of try to inspire women, inspire confidence, and be real as possible on the internet, as much as we can. So that's kind of just like a little bit about what I do.
It's funny just hearing you say that. I did not know you were on The Bachelor.
Yeah. I love that.
Like I just saw some of your stuff and I was like, oh, I really like it. But because I don't watch TV. So it's funny hearing you say that. So I don't watch TV. So I didn't know you were on The Bachelor. And I know that that's a very popular show. Can you give us a backstory to that? You being like, what made you sort of sign up for that? Because from what I remember, because the show's been on a long time, but just back when I did used to watch TV eons ago, it was like, from what I remember, and you correct me if I'm wrong, it's like a bunch of women sort of vying for one man's love. Kind of like Flavor of Love, almost like a
yeah. So the way The Bachelor is set up and The Bachelorette, because it goes both ways, it's like it'll be like one man and like 30 women, and it's kind of the journey of like finding love mutually. It can feel a little competitive at times, but it's definitely about two people finding love essentially through the show and going home if there's no connection.
Okay, and you were on The Bachelor or The Bachelorette?
I was on The Bachelor. So The Bachelorette's where it's a female lead and 30 men. And The Bachelor's the male lead and then 30 women.
Okay. Yeah. So give us the backstory, just kind of like what made you sort of sign up for that or want to join that? Like, what was that about?
So it's actually a little bit funny. I never watched The Bachelor before. Like, I think when I was younger, I probably like saw snippets of it and I just didn't put it together. But I was in a 4-year relationship. So my whole college career, I was in a relationship. And after college, we had broken up and it was just like this new Deandra that was coming into place and finding myself. And so my ex-boyfriend's sister was like, hey, there's a show called The Bachelor. You know, if you're looking for love in a new place, like you should definitely apply to it. So it was the most random thing. I randomly applied and somehow just through the process got chosen, made it to the end and made it on the show. Like so random.
Oh, wow. And, now that you're not on it and you can kind of reflect back on it, what do you think of your time, just sort of doing the show? What did you learn about yourself?
I think that like reflecting back on it now, I learned how to be vulnerable because you have to be like, you don't have any choice but to be vulnerable. Um, Especially with past relationships, I feel like I'm very defensive and like I have this guard up and I just don't like to open up to people.
Mm,
So my time on the show, like forced vulnerability, forced communication, because that's the premise of getting to know someone and opening up and feeling like you're in a safe place. And I think I've learned a lot about how to just be more in touch with my vulnerability and open up to people and be genuine.
that's awesome. And that kind of, I guess, it's funny how that sort of happened, that topic, but it definitely sort of leads the way into our talk today. Because one of the way that I found you is through your confidence piece on women. And I feel like that's so confident, so confident. I feel like that's so important to talk about how women can be confident, especially women of color. And I
Yeah.
think confidence is one of those words. It's a small word, or, a relatively small word, but it has a huge meaning. So can you talk a little bit about, and I don't know if maybe this segment for you, the confidence series that you did, sort of evolved from that time on The Bachelor, in addition to learning how to be vulnerable, but can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course.
I don't know where my voice is going today, but
Oh, you're fine. So I like that you said confidence is a small word, but it has like a huge meaning and it
Mhm.
really does. And as I grew up, confidence is something some people will naturally have it, but it's something you have to develop and something that you have to build. Like some people are just naturally born confident, but I feel like it's something that you can really work on. Um, I wasn't always confident. Like everyone has insecurities. Everyone has things about themselves that they don't like. There's some people more than others.
Mhm.
Um, but I think what helps me in life was I was a communication major in college. So that was like my first kind of like brush with body language and like understanding like how other people perceive you and understand like how to take up a room. So for people who, were psych majors or doctors and stuff like that, they didn't necessarily get like that physical and like mental learning and training on communication, like how big of an impact it has and how you can relay confidence even if you don't feel like it.
Mm.
Um, so through college, that was my first kind of brush with you can create what you want people to see. And then kind of stepping into yourself through the show, like you have no choice but to be confident. Like when you're put in an environment like that and there's 30 women and you have to stand out, you always have to stand out. You have no choice but to like show what you got, essentially.
Mm.
So going through the show also further developed that. And then the more that I see like people catching on, like, oh, you seem so confident or you do this and that, I'm starting to learn like there's things that I just naturally did and do that people don't always naturally do that
Really?
I
Like
can
what?
share.
Like what?
So
What have you found?
simple things, which is why I made my confidence series, because I was so surprised that a lot of people
Mm.
were like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that. Like simple things like sitting up straight, like the difference between like how you
Mhm.
portray confidence if you sit up straight versus like being hunched. It gives off like you're insecure, you're closed off. Like that's what it can portray.
Mhm.
You might not necessarily feel like that. Just little things like that, speaking clearly, not using filler words like
Mhm.
and like a lot.
Mm.
Those are all things that can, you know, build onto you looking unconfident when you really are. Does that make sense?
It does. And I'm assuming that you are a woman of color, but I don't want to incorrectly assume.
Yes,
Um,
ma'am. I am.
how do you identify?
So I'm Nigerian. My dad's full Nigerian. My mom's white. So I identify as both, but not really, because you look at me and I'm a Black woman. So Nigerian is what I go by.
Thank you for clarifying that. And the reason I ask is because I want to know from you and your experience with confidence.
Mhm.
Again, I feel like confidence is a layered word, but I also feel like it has a separate meaning, or there's another layer of confidence for women of color that they have to acquire. And I
Mhm.
want to know what your thoughts are on that.
So, I mean, being a Black woman, period, in today's day and age, I feel like you have to be 10 times what maybe a white woman would be. And like, I have to choose my words carefully here because I don't want it to come off weird, but
I get it.
yeah, you have to compete on a different level. Like,
Mhm.
for example, being on the show, it was so much easier for my white counterparts to, connect with this man or connect with any man on the beach compared to the Black counterparts. And
Mhm.
to me, it was obvious. To some people, it's not, but I also know what to look for and like, just reading people. So for Black women, I feel like in a world that kind of wants to bring you down or take everything from you, but not want to be you, you have to like stay strong and be confident. But then it's like if you're super confident, you get like, oh, like labeled as maybe like an aggressive Black woman. It's like if you know what you want and you're, willing to voice it and you're confident
Mhm.
about it, like some people take it as like, oh my gosh, she's so aggressive, or oh my God, you get labeled all these different things. So it's like we're dancing this fine line of loving ourselves, being confident, but also, hearing the world tell you like you shouldn't feel this way. You shouldn't be, so sure about this. You shouldn't speak out about this topic.
Or you should change everything about yourself, like how you look, or how you wear your hair, or what you do, just the basic element of being a human being.
Absolutely. The hair thing's a big one too. Like how you wear your hair in the workplace. I feel like the styles, of course, braids are now being more accepted in the workplace, but just like a Black woman, like thinking about wearing your natural hair, if you want to wear it in
Mhm.
afro, like how it's kind of labeled as unprofessional or distraction, like in school.
Yeah, yeah. And it wasn't too long ago that our governor here in California, he had to pass the Crown Act. And what the Crown Act is saying that you can wear your hair
Right.
to your job, your school, or whomever or wherever
Right.
without suffering some sort of repercussion, being fired, being kicked out, or all these other things. So it's interesting to me that we actually have to have an act in place signed by our governor in order to be who we are. So, with all the nuances of being a woman of color, how did you navigate? How do you navigate that extra layer?
I feel like that's kind of where you just have to like block out the noise comes in. And as sad as that is, it's like there's nothing you can really do but be yourself. Because at the end of the day, like the world's going to accept you or they're not going to accept you. And like,
Mhm.
thinking about like even going on television with my braids, like my blonde braids, that's new, that's fresh, like I hadn't seen anyone previously go on with braids. So it was almost something that I felt insecure about at first, going on television with my braids. And then when I was there, I just embraced it because this is me. And it's like I actually got a lot of great feedback, and you'll be surprised when you're just yourself how many people like actually will love you and accept you. Um, so like navigating it as a Black woman, it's like, yeah, it's something that we're always going to think about, but at the end of the day, do you. Like you have no choice but to do you, and you have no choice but to rock your hair. And even if you feel weird about it, it's one of those things, like if you love yourself, other people can tell that you love yourself.
Mhm.
That shows.
Mhm.
But if you don't love yourself and it comes across as like not insecure, but it comes across as you're uncomfortable, other people will tell that you're uncomfortable being you.
Hmm. And I'm wondering, in your experience, does that translate differently with women than it does men? If that makes sense.
Like as far as them having to think of different things that they do as Black men that might come off a certain way.
Or no, just like how you show up, because I feel like, for example, you went on The Bachelor.
Mhm.
And I didn't watch it, so I don't know what your experience is. But
Mhm.
I imagine when you're competing with women, typically with women, we wear makeup and we do all the things we do for other women.
Right.
right? Men you can connect with emotionally. Yes, they like the physical stuff, but we really, when it comes down to appearance, honestly, a lot of viciousness has come from women on women
Right.
versus a man. There might be different areas of confidence or areas of where you have to sort of to appear a certain way. So with women there might be physical confidence, with men there might be mental or emotional confidence. And I'm just wondering, from with your experience maybe on The Bachelor and also in other aspects of your life, have you noticed a difference in terms of treatment or how you were received?
Yeah. I mean, I think that for men, I like the part that you brought up, like being emotional, like the emotional parts of men that they might have to work on more so than like the physical appearance like women have.
Mhm.
I do think that men have to navigate on a different level because, like, let's speak for Black men. Like, Black men are, they have like this persona when you think of a Black man that they have to be so hard and they have to be so strong and they have to be all these things. As a Black man, I can understand how it can be uncomfortable to be vulnerable and to be perceived as soft or open or loving, these things that, we take away from the Black man.
Mhm.
So I think for them, there's like this whole layer of navigating life and confidence that they have to work on as far as like the image, the way that the world perceives them and how they're accepted, even on television, off television, of
Mhm.
being who they truly are and like stepping out of the stigma of like they have to be hard, like they're players, or they come from this certain part of life so they can't be like this. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah. And for you, you said that you didn't used to be confident. So can you paint us a picture of what you used to look like in your relationships and sort of walk me through your evolution from then until now?
Absolutely. Before I came into myself now, when I was in relationships, I felt like two people possessed one another. So like when you get into a
Mm.
relationship, you own that person
Mhm.
and that person owns you. And
Mhm.
so you start to lack confidence when you feel like that person has something of their own that they're doing and you're not involved. And that will
Mhm.
really cripple your confidence. So it's like if your guy wants to go out with his friends one night, or if you see your guy talking to a girl, like your confidence is dependent on the way that they act. That
Mm.
was the way my mind works. Like, okay, my confidence comes from the way that this person acts.
Do you
Um,
understand where that sort of came from? That sort of that insecurity around feeling like you have to possess or be in control or having to know. Do you what are your
personality.
thoughts? Yeah, what are your thoughts about where that came from?
I think it comes from like being a child of divorced parents
Mm.
and seeing that love only can last so long, or, in some cases can only last so long. And it's like the feeling of abandonment in a way, like you don't ever want to be alone.
Mm.
And so I think that in my early relationships, like I wanted to hold on so tight and I wanted to, because it's like no one wants to be alone. No one wants to
Mm.
feel like they're not worthy. No one wants to feel like they're left behind.
Mm.
So I feel like that comes from, watching my mom and dad get divorced and then seeing my mom go through the struggle of being alone and like trying to find love again and how hard that can be. So it's
Mm.
like when you have something, you just want to hold on to it so tight. But I feel like the tighter you hold on to something, the less likely you're
Mm.
able to keep it.
And I think a lot of people that resonates with a lot of people. Can you talk a little bit about how those insecurities would sort of manifest and feeling like you would have to possess? Like what sort of things were you doing to your partner when that anxiety would flare up?
I feel like it's, you're getting in fights with your partner, you're calling them while they're out to check in on them, you're watching people's stories, you're wanting to go through their phone. And
Mm.
I don't like the idea of having to go through someone's phone. I don't want to check on the person that I love. I don't want to have to feel like, are they talking to other girls? Like, are they entertaining women while they're out at the club? Are they, do they still view me as like the only girl in their world? I think it was manifesting that way. Like, it comes off insecure when you're constantly checking on your partner and being like, what are you doing? Like, why didn't you call me? And, college Deandra was probably way more like that. And I'm like, I'm going to say what I want to say. I'm like a very like straightforward person. So I was probably like a lot. I feel bad for him. He was a strong person. I feel bad for him, but I, I'm trying, even to this day, like I still work on it because I still have like moments where I want to flash back and like be possessive and be like, I mean, I feel like everyone kind of struggles with that balance of like letting people just be, because you can't control people. And if you try to control them, it'll never work.
Interesting. I feel like I'm quite the opposite. So it's
Really?
interesting hearing you talk about it. I've never had the urge to go through a partner's phone or check up.
Right.
So I'm like, possessiveness for me is really not like, that's not a thing for me. But when I think back on it, I've had partners who've wanted to be that way, but me, I'm not. Like, I feel like I've had friends call me hippie because I'm very free spirited in that way. And I'm just like, if you're going to do what you're going to do, then do it.
Right.
I've learned very early on, if a person wants to do whatever, they're going to do whatever, and there's nothing I can do about it.
Right.
But I can control my actions. So it's very interesting just sort of hearing that. And I'm kind of curious for you, what do you notice about yourself? Like you said, you have those flashbacks of wanting to go through their phone or wanting to be possessive. What do you notice is happening either within yourself or within your relationship that you get triggered in that way?
I think so. Like that was the college version of me. And like since college, like obviously that's something I check, but I think a lot of it is triggered by the kind of person that I attract. And they always say like you attract the kind of person, and it sucks because I haven't always attracted like the best, most emotionally available people. So I'm like, what is this saying about myself? But I think it's because some of the guys that I have dated in the past are possessive themselves. So then when it comes to like me trying to work on not being possessive, being hands off, like it triggers me when they're possessive and I can't be possessive back. And then I'm like, okay, well, I want to go tit for tat with you, but then realizing this isn't love. This is not how love feels. Like it feels like a moment of like, I don't know how to describe it. Like, I think the internet is also a very toxic place because they glorify these relationships that it's like, I'm going through your phone. Like, it's like toxic. Like we love each other so much. Like it's funny at this point on the internet to act that way, but in real life, it's not funny at all. I don't know. That's a really good question. I don't know. Like sometimes I just have a feeling where I'm like, I want to know something, but then the conscious standards like, don't act.
Yeah.
Don't show.
Yeah. And although I've never done it, I can say for me personally, and maybe this might resonate with you, I'm just having a conversation, but I would say I very vividly remember like that coming into my mind once or twice. Like I almost want to check to see what my partner is doing. And I noticed right then and there, I said, oh, that's funny. I've never had that before. So I notice now if I'm having it, it's because I feel like my needs in the relationship aren't being met. And I'm noticing this person is pulling away in a way that feels very unhealthy.
Right.
Like I almost feel like there's an energy that wasn't there that's being introduced in the relationship. And therefore my anxiety is telling me this feels weird. And as opposed to me tapping into how I felt at the moment or being mindful of how I felt, it went to like, oh, well, maybe I should look into it. But then I'm like, it's for me, it was enough to say the fact that I even want to do that, it's time to go.
And I mean, I have a question for you because you're very knowledgeable on this. I feel like modern day dating is so much different than dating was even like 5 years ago, 6 years ago. I feel like people don't always have the best intentions. And as sweet and great as they may seem day one, day two, day three, in a weekend, people are capable of like flipping that switch and giving you the impression that they're really into you and you're being genuine, and then you're being vulnerable and opening up to them and then switching. And I feel like I've experienced a lot of that, like giving me the impression that this is something that's going to work long time, and then the flip switches, and it's almost like, it's that weird energy you're saying, like this almost uncomfortable, like I don't know what's going on. And once you don't know what's going on, then it's time to pull away. But I hate that that's the dynamic of modern day dating.
It is. And it comes across in terms of ghosting. It comes across, and I call it micro ghosting, where someone might just sort of, for example, somebody might be doing really well, and the communication's on point, and all of a sudden they pull away for 3 days, a week or two,
Mhm.
right? And so they change up really quick. So that could be an example of what um, what a person is doing. And what I would say to you, and I want to make sure I'm answering you, right? Because you're noticing that things are changing. But what I've learned um, is to not be emotional about it.
Mhm.
For me, dating is that. It is data collecting. And unless we are in a mutually exclusive relationship, which means that over a period of time, you have shown yourself to be consistent
Mhm.
and beneficial to my life, and same for me to you, then dating me is a privilege, or being in a mutually exclusive relationship, rather, is a privilege, right? And so that person has shown me consistently, but up until then, you have to sort of prove that you're capable of that. And I feel like what I've noticed now, just in working with clients or working with people in general, what people tend to do that gets them into trouble, and I've been guilty of this way back in the day, especially when I was in my 20s too, is that you meet someone and you quickly funnel yourself into a relationship. So you're not really dating, but you're just sort of, we might go out once or twice, and now we're together.
Yeah.
And we're
Yeah.
doing all the things, right? We're doing all the things that people would do, except for, we haven't observed each other over a period of time to see that your behavior is consistent. So we might be having sex. We
Mhm.
might be, I might be meeting your parents. We might be kicking it. We might go out to the movies or doing whatever. We might travel together occasionally, but we haven't given it enough time, non-sexual time,
Right.
right? To actually see what each other's like once the honeymoon wears off. So I haven't seen you and what you are in terms of how you handle conflict. I haven't seen you consistently show up, in terms of handling problems in the relationships or just general things, right? Because there's some people, that when you first start dating, they only present to you the side of themselves that they want you to see,
Mhm.
right? So that means they might have a whole other life that you don't know about, which, I've discovered that over the period of dating. But what I find is that people don't want to data collect. What they want to do is they want to have an immediate attachment to somebody. And it's very dangerous and very risky, because the fact of the matter is relationships develop over time. You cannot go to Amazon, click a button, and say relationship delivered at my doorstep tomorrow, and then expect it to, ride off into the sunset. And I think that's where people get it confused, if that
I
makes.
No, that makes complete sense, and I love that. And I think that I kind of like I hate that I'm even saying that. I feel like our generation is just so weird now that they don't do dating the old fashioned way. Like it's not like a series of like setting up things to, places to meet and like seeing what you're doing in advance. Now it's like last second, like, okay, like what are you doing tonight? Like, let's go grab dinner, if that, or it's like,
Yeah.
let's hang out. It's that rush that you're saying where you guys are doing everything that someone would do in a relationship, laying up, watching movies, but there's no conversation, there's no time elapsed to like understand, like, is this person capable of everything that I need them to be capable of?
Well, and I think that there's both sides of it, because I think, a lot of women that I've encountered want to be in a relationship. And again, very similar to what you were saying in terms of how you were dating. Um, there's fear-based dating, which I've written about. Fear-based dating means that I'm afraid that if I don't snap this up when I can, that's it for me. And so I'm just going to take the first available opportunity through the first available person, and I'm going to make it work, as opposed to sort of vetting these people out and feeling secure and confident that, hey, if this person doesn't work out, there's going to be many others, because there's, I don't know how many billions of people on earth, right? There's how many
Right.
billions of men on earth. But if this person doesn't work out, there's going to be another.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so easy. It's like easy to hear that and be like, that's the perfect like way to do it. And then when people get emotions involved, because like, sometimes you just click with people and it's like you want to fall into that space, but it's so good to check yourself and realize like, if this is the one, there's going to be another. There's always going to be another who's willing to do something that this one
Yeah.
won't.
And I think it's good too for people to recognize what their feelings are and feel good about that without feeling like you have to actually attach an action to something. So you
Right.
could be like, oh, this man is attractive. Okay, because he's attractive, I want to have sex with him. That doesn't equate. Or this person makes me feel really good when I'm around them. Therefore, you don't have to attach the action of I have to be in a relationship with this guy because I'm gonna feel this way all the time. It's like, no, just notice how you're feeling and enjoy that without having to attach um, these sort of long lasting actions to it,
Mhm.
if that makes sense.
No, it does. So for anyone who has been in relationships that or are currently going through relationships where they fall into the emotional really quick, fast, and then they want to test to see if it's going to be a long-term thing, but they've already done everything that you would do in a relationship, how do you recommend they navigate either a conversation or like navigate moving forward to make that relationship develop? Or is
So,
there no hope after you've crossed the line?
I won't say that there's no hope, but what I will say is that it's very small.
Mhm.
Because what you're doing when you do that is you're actually doing a relationship in reverse,
Mm.
right? A relationship is supposed to naturally start out slowly over time, and you start to foster that bond and those connections over time. What you're talking about is people who have built a relationship off of attraction and chemistry or sexual energy and took that and ran with it and started out with all of those wonderful hot and heavy things up front without knowing each other.
Mhm.
Right. And think about it, like if you don't know somebody, and then when again, once the honeymoon starts to wear off, when people are no longer on their best behavior, what's happening? You're seeing them for who they really are, and vice versa. And 9 times out of 10, if you didn't really get to know it, you're probably not going to like the stranger that you ended up with. And it's also going to be something that is very cyclical, meaning that you pick someone based off of a pattern or a habit. So
Mhm.
typically, when you do that, you're typically picking the same person over and over and over again, which historically has not worked for you.
That's amazing. I think that was so well said.
Yeah. So there are those like one-off that like, oh, I met this man in Paris and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
That might happen, but I would say that is not the norm story. That is not the norm of how relationships work. And those two people may have lucked out or whatever, but again, that's not the norm.
Right.
Yeah. So I think, kind of working on yourself, and I'm glad that you were able to recognize that you weren't that you felt insecure and you were lacking in confidence, and that was something that you wanted to work on. And I'm curious to know what was it that made you stop and say, "Hey, I need to work on this for myself." Like what was it? Where was the defining moment for you?
I think it was running into those kind of relationships that you were talking about, like those ones that like burn really fast and then they end. And it's like, what happened? Like, where did I go wrong? Like, why am I feeling like I'm not, the person that is having these, long lasting relationships?
Mhm.
So it's like whenever I started to realize like that kind of pattern was happening, then it's like I started reading books and like I started to understand more about like self development. And then I started understanding like you attract, what you get, like everything that you get is kind of like a reflection of you in some way. And so then I was attracting all of these like emotionally unavailable men. who, you know, looked a certain way or did certain things.
Mhm.
And it kind of just clicked in my head, like there's something in me, like the possessiveness of the men. I'm like, there's something in me that these men are coming into my life. So I think it kind of clicked, like even kind of before the show, I was already going into it. And then I think also the idea of like you're dating 30 different people, not getting your feelings hurt necessarily,
Yep.
like allowing it to like develop and
Yep.
like as much as you want to be emotional right away, it's like you're also vetting the person. Like just because he's the bachelor doesn't mean that you also you have it's like a two-way street. Like you have to also like him. He doesn't just get to pick you
Yeah.
and that's it. Like you have to also vet someone. So I think it was just, you know, the last 2 or 3 years, it just kind of clicked in my head. And it's something that I'm actively working on. And I'm so close. Like I don't like to give a lot of people a chance because that I'm like really like a stickler, but I've also gotten that reputation of being a stickler now. Like I'm hard to please, or like, you know, I get so many people saying like you're so, I don't want to say like aggressive, but I'm just like really honest and like upfront. Like I'm not really here to entertain people. Like that's just not been my thing. I'm like not here for like the funsies, the hooking up, pick somebody else.
Can you give me an example of what, like, can you give me an example of that?
Like of how like I communicate that to men
Or
or
how you're being a stickler? Can you, yeah, and how that, like, how you're communicating, or like what are some of the things that you've been a stickler about?
so like if I meet men out, so like if I'm like at a club or like at a bar or like even at a dinner spot and I have someone that comes up to me and it's like, I want to get to know you, but they're like running game like they do on every woman. You're so beautiful. Like, you know, like I want, you know, you should give me a chance. Like call her. I'm like, first of all, like we're the setting, like the club, you know, out isn't necessarily the best place to meet somebody, but I'm more so like, hey, look, you know, I'm not really interested in just like a fling. Like I'm not, that's not me. So it's like I literally will voice that. And then
Mm.
it's like, oh, there's such a challenge. You're so hard. And then it's like they try even harder. But I'm like, I'm being really honest with you right now. Like you really don't, like I don't really want to get to know you or don't care to get to know you if you're
Oh.
not in a place in life where I'll be your friend.
Same.
No, like I'm so honest. Like I will be your friend. Like that's no problem. But I have a hard time entertaining men because I just feel like there's not always like a genuine,
Why?
I don't know. Cause I think maybe, I mean,
So if someone tells you you're beautiful,
thank you. That's it. Like, I'm just like, thank you.
okay, but
But
you're saying that that's it, and like you wouldn't entertain. And I get it, like not everybody that you want to entertain, but is that like am I hearing that that's a hard stop for you?
I mean, I think when someone comes up to you and like the first thing that is addressed is like your beauty or like your physical look, I'm kind of like,
Why?
I feel like you say this to a lot of people. I don't know. I think, I don't know. Is there a deeper reason that I'm that way?
Of course, I'm a therapist, so I'm going to say that.
Okay. I want to hear, I mean, I'm defensive because I just don't want to be hurt.
Okay, so you feel like your beauty has hurt you?
Not necessarily, but I feel like people get like this misconception that because I look a certain way that I want to accept certain things or that I want to put up with certain things or that I'm not as deep as I may be. And
Okay.
that bothers me.
Hmm. Okay, so your beauty has been weaponized against you.
Yeah. Like a lot of times, like if people don't hear me speak, they're like this Instagram bimbo, like, or, you know,
Mhm.
you're just a pretty face or, you know, and so I just always kind of took it as a bad thing when the first thing that men do is comment on your looks because I'm like, that's very surface level. Like,
But to be fair,
yeah,
you
I'm not,
have to know this. I mean, but to be fair, here's the thing, and this is kind of what I was talking about women and men, right? And
yeah,
again, I'm going to the typical heteronormative, old fashioned. This is just me being very old fashioned and going back to the basics of human science, heteronormative human science. Men are very visual creatures.
yeah,
Women, we kind of look for intellect, and then we kind of go to the deeper stuff. Men, they start the opposite way, typically. Not
mhm,
always, but most men start with beauty first. Like if someone is attractive, they're going to notice that, right? And even when you're dating, and again, people may feel differently that listen to the show, but men usually think about it when you're on a a dating website, right? Bumble, Hinge, Tinder, OkCupid, Black, whatever, all the Christian Mingle, whatever, right? You got less than 10 seconds to catch someone's attention. They're swiping. What are they doing? They're looking to see, okay, is this someone that looks good enough that I would have sex with? Hate to be shallow, but that's typically what they're looking at. They'll look, if you look good, then I'll read the bio, right? Then I'll get to know the person, but honestly, most of the time, that's what people are looking at.
You're right. You're not wrong at all. So,
and it doesn't make them bad people. It's just how we sort of have been programmed to work. I mean, even think about it for you. If you think about even for just yourself, which this might be a projection even for yourself, right? Because when you were saying that you were going after men that looked a certain way, like when you were kind of going down the path and you were starting in these relationships that were based off of chemistry, you started out looking and sort of trying to funnel into a relationship based off of the initial attraction. And you're not the only person that does that or did that. You don't do that anymore. Does that make sense?
Like, you're so right. So I guess my question to you then is, I mean, obviously, like now I try to be more open and understanding, but I still have that little bit of distrust of intention when it comes to men, especially good looking men, or men that, have a lot of attention from women. So it's like, how does one work on vetting these men then? If it's always like the same thing, it's always them like, you're so beautiful, or like, I want to get to know you. It's like almost like love bombing. Like they promise you the world the first day that they meet you. And it's like, okay, well, show me.
Okay, so that's different. So you're talking about separate things. So you're talking about one, a person that says you're beautiful, and then you're talking about two, a person that promises you the world at the very beginning. Right. So those are two different things. So if I start out saying, Deandra, you're beautiful, and I'd like to, get to know you, that's different. Right. And again, going back to what I was saying in the beginning, dating is data collection. Right. So you are collecting data, which tells me that if you're just sort of, if you're getting your hopes up with someone that you have very little emotional investment, or you should have very little emotional investment in, then you have issues with falling for potential. And it's no longer about them, it's about you.
Right.
Right. And that's okay. You're not alone in that, right? A lot of women and a lot of people do, women, men, whomever, do that. So I think, again, it goes back to the data collection. And then with people that are love bombing, it sounds like you're able to recognize it from what you're telling me that, oh, this person is making all these promises and telling me they want this and that up front. That's a red flag. So it's not the problem that you have. You don't have a problem with recognizing it. It seems like you have a problem, A, either speaking up about what you're recognizing, or B, acting on what they're showing you, enforcing the boundaries, right? About, hey, listen, we don't know each other well enough for you to kind of be making those sort of promises all the, up front.
Yeah.
So you got to, I'm still in that stage of trying to get to know you, sir. What makes you want to say things like you want to give me the world? What is it? Where is that coming from? And what does that look like for you?
Right.
And just sort of having that conversation as opposed to saying, oh, this man wants to give me the world. I love that. Yes, I'll take it.
Yeah.
You're sort of hanging your hat on words, right? You're hanging your hat on poetry at this point, right? And that could disappear, right? As opposed to this person's actions. And he shouldn't want to give you the world up front because he doesn't know you and you don't know him.
Facts. Absolutely. And I like this. And it's something that I'm like recently learning how to verbalize is what you said is like someone can say something all that they want and they can promise you this, this, and that. But the only thing that you should really be deciding on is their actions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because this is a stranger. The stranger could be a murderer.
Absolutely.
You know.
No,
Right. Right. But I think again, and that's kind of the piece. And it's not the fact that I think people tend to think that they're targeted, right? Oh, they're only saying this to me.
Right.
But as you said, they probably say this to a lot of people. It's just the fact that there's something in me that's sort of going to make a relationship out of their words, as
Right.
opposed to making sure this person proves themselves to be who they say they are.
Right. That's deep.
Yeah, it is deep. But I think confidence comes in that, right? And it's like, oh, I think there's something that, again, with the confidence piece, oh, I know I'm beautiful. Thank you. Of course.
Yeah. And as far as getting to know these men and trying to decipher between the ones you want to give a chance and the ones that you don't want to give a chance, I feel like confidence also plays in is like knowing when to say no and step away. Like kind of what you were saying before, it's the confidence to know that there's someone that can do this for you afterwards. You don't have to cling on to the potential of this person. Like there's never going to be another person that comes through your life that can change your life in the most amazing way.
Absolutely. And I think that the other piece of confidence, in addition to what you're saying, is the person's words, again, should not have value. So if somebody says you're beautiful, or someone turns around in the same breath and says you're ugly, those words should not define or affect your worth for that day, because you being beautiful is something that already you should know. So if I come and say that to you, like, oh, you're beautiful, if that's a pick me up for you, then that means that those are things that you need to work on internalizing for yourself. Like you need to work on knowing your worth, knowing your beauty, so that someone can't come and swindle you with their words and just say all these things that you want to hear, because it's not something that you don't believe, and you've wanted desperately for someone to sort of say those things to you.
Absolutely. And that's also something. So I'm reading the Four Agreements, and it kind of goes into that because it's like I love the book,
Yeah.
but it's essentially like when someone says something about you, if you believe it, it becomes an agreement. So it's like if someone says you're ugly,
Mm-hmm.
if you believe it, if you really
Mm-hmm.
think that you're ugly, it's an agreement. Okay, you're ugly then. Like you believe that you're ugly. This person said that you're ugly. It's you're confirming that. And I like that you're saying like, even if someone calls you beautiful, if you already know you're beautiful, that doesn't impact you. That doesn't give you the pick me up. It can be like, oh, thank you, compliment. But it doesn't sway whether you think that you're beautiful or not.
Absolutely. And I think that's the piece, is like you can't give me something that I've already given myself. And I think that's where people fall into the trap. And confidence is one of those things, right? It's like, of course, if you've been in some relationships that have torn down your confidence, that's another story, right? Because there are relationships that are abusive and toxic and that are dysfunctional, unhealthy, that we talk about on the show. But again, I think if you learn self-empowerment, which is what confidence is, nobody can take that from you. Once you've established that.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I love that.
I
I
feel like
love that.
that's a therapy session, honey.
It's so interesting how these interviews work out, but we're two women having a conversation, and I love them because you never know where they're gonna go. And I'm glad that this is sort of resonating with you, and you can kind of stick it in
Absolutely.
your tool belt and go
Absolutely.
on your journey with it.
No,
You
for
deserve
sure.
that. You deserve that, right? You deserve that.
Thank you.
What does your confidence routine look like on a day-to-day basis?
My confidence routine. That's
Mm-hmm.
so for me, confidence comes from partially the promises that I make to myself and that I keep. So like my confidence routine is when I say I'm going to wake up at 6:30 in the morning and go work out and go on my walk and take me time, listen to my meditation, like when I get up and I do that, it helps me keep
Mm-hmm.
my confidence because when I say I'm going to do something, I know that I'm going to do something regardless if I feel it emotionally that day or not.
Mm-hmm.
And so my confidence routine is like making my habits in my schedule and sticking to my habits because when I'm not emotionally feeling confident or I'm not emotionally feeling something, I know that these habits are going to be a continuation of things that I know that I am. Um, so I guess my confidence routine is, sticking to the promises that I keep to myself, whether that's working out, whether it's meditating, whether it's, reading a book. Um, it's loving myself. Like I'm big on affirmations. I'm healthy, I'm successful, I'm beautiful, I'm capable. It's
Mm-hmm.
saying out loud things that I am. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then continuously learning about the self. Because I feel like confidence is the stance of like really knowing yourself. And when you really, really know yourself, that's when you're just your most confident. Because
Mm-hmm.
as you said, you can't take away from me something that I already gave myself, or you can't give me something that I already gave myself.
Yeah.
And people who don't know themselves, it's easy to take and give from them.
Mm.
So people who say that they aren't confident because of this, this, and this, and this is because someone took that from you at one point, or you gave that to somebody and you didn't keep it for yourself anymore.
I love that.
So,
One last question. I'm kind of curious about your affirmations.
yeah.
What's your practice as far as affirmations?
Speaking positively out loud
Okay.
and writing down. I do both.
Okay.
So there isn't like a specific way that it has to be done, but it's saying thank you for the things that I have, regardless if I have them or not.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I'm thankful for, that always having abundance of money. Like, thank you, for having this. And thank you for you're very successful, Deandra. Like, thank you for being driven.
Okay.
Like, there's no specific routine, but I'm constantly telling myself these things out loud or writing them down, especially if I'm feeling low. It's just a reminder. Thank you for these things that I have.
I like that. You know, and I asked that because in my experience, there's a lot of people that are probably thinking like, oh, affirmations. They don't really work for me. I'm kind of saying these things, I'm putting these stickies on the mirror, or I have this journal. And so I always tell people that affirmations don't work without confirmation and validation.
Mhm.
And so actually seeing that and confirming those messages on a daily practice, which can also, definitely be a mood booster, but just looking for that and reprogramming your brain to kind of see those messages regularly, see people like that, that sort of emulate that or have those values and traits to just sort of confirm that, if that makes sense.
Mhm. So you're saying like whenever people have an affirmation that they need to be seeing it in real time too?
Yeah, I think that's the piece is like, a lot of people kind of write down these things like I am beautiful, but there also needs to be a validation and confirmation process
Mhm.
to make that sort of stick
Mhm.
and be real. Otherwise, in my experience, in terms of working with people, they kind of don't believe it or they give up on that right away.
Yeah. I mean, I guess to me, the affirmations that I have are things that I work to. So it's like, I'm so thankful that I'm healthy.
Yeah.
I eat healthy. I take care of my body. It's like, I guess you can't say that I'm so thankful that I'm healthy or that I live this lifestyle if you aren't actively trying and
Mm,
practicing the things that you're
mhm,
saying. And
mm.
I feel like people tie that into like manifestation because manifestation
Right,
is the practice of already doing what you are saying that you want to do.
right, right.
So
Yeah.
I understand completely what you're saying. Like you need real life to confirm what you're saying.
Absolutely, absolutely. This interview has been fire. I love it.
Thanks.
But we're at the end.
I'm sad. I loved talking to you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I love talking to you too. And of course, I loved having you, and you're such a breath of fresh air. And so, my hope for you is that you definitely find the love that you desire, that really just loves you in all the ways possible, right? Because you are confident and you deserve that. Um, but tell us how, the listeners can find you, connect with you if this show really resonates with them.
Absolutely. So you guys can find me on Instagram, my first and last name, Deandra Kanu, Twitter and TikTok, the same thing. And then YouTube, Deandra Kanu. So all my first and last name, I'm on all the platforms. So you can find me there.
And I would definitely link them to the show notes. Are there any upcoming projects or things that we, can support you with?
I love that. I'm definitely working on my YouTube channel. I'm just kind of like curating like what kind of content I want to make and like what's authentic to me and hopefully a podcast soon.
Oh,
So look out for these things. I'll definitely have you on my podcast. I hope, I hope you'll be a guest. I'd love to have you. But yeah, you guys can find me online.
awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Of course. Thank you. Have a great day.
That interview was a little untraditional, full of surprises, and I think that's been one of the only interviews that I can recall in my 4+ years of doing this show, where the person that I was interviewing then turned around and interviewed me and asked me questions. But I really enjoyed having Deandra on the show. She's really a gem and just a real sweetheart, and I loved how raw and open she was. And I appreciate her letting me talk with her and, explain some things from my perspective. So I really enjoy shows like this. So I'd love to know what you thought about the show, what your reflections were, if it resonated with you, what Deandra had to say. And if so, let us know on social media. And of course, the email is in the show notes, so you can always email us. And until next time, you guys take care of yourselves and be well. Check out the sneak preview of next week's episode. What people tend to underestimate or minimize, or they don't think about when it comes to dealing with or being in a relationship with a narcissist. And, just in counseling people over the years, just my own experience, also in my own training too, and working with people with some very severe psychopathy, sociopathy, and personality disorder.